Dean Rueben Karau was born on March 28, 1921, in Kewanee, Illinois, where he lived until he joined the Navy in 1942. He was a roly-poly little guy, like most tots and toddlers, but he was competitive, even then, determined to beat anyone on anything at any time. Dean was the second of 4 boys born to Louis and Edna Karau. He and his brothers, including his oldest brother, Don, pictured here, were close. The boys enjoyed being with each other. This iconic Karau family photo epitomizes the boys' togetherness. As the boys grew up, they were active, both in and out of school. And they were growing into handsome young men. All of the boys had paper routes, but Dean's entrepreneurship made the newspaper. Seems he was hit by a car delivering his newspapers, ending up with a double leg fracture. But his first concern was, who will deliver my papers? Dean played marbles from an early age, and my dad often told me about his brother's exploits, including finishing second in the 1933 All-City Marbles Championship. As I said, Dean was competitive. Dean was active throughout his high school years. He attended the American Legion-sponsored Boys State in Springfield. He also was a proficient writer and worker for the high school newspaper. But because the school didn't offer baseball, he refrained from playing any other sports, preferring to play on YMCA teams, adult teams, and then baseball in summer leagues. Dean graduated from Kewanee High School in 1939. When Dean began working at Walworth after finishing high school, he continued his fevered desire to compete, playing golf, hunting, fishing, bowling, and playing basketball, as captured by this company newspaper drawing. But Dean's passion continued to be baseball, where he excelled. His high school yearbook proclaimed, bound to make baseball fame at that, he can run the bases in 2 seconds flat. And that was in a school which didn't even offer baseball as a sport. On December 8, the United States declared war against Japan and Germany. The Japanese immediately followed with attacks against U.S. and British bases in the Philippines, Guam, Midway Island, Wake Island, Malaya, and Hong Kong. Within days, the Japanese were masters of the Pacific. The day after Pearl Harbor, Japan launched its invasion of the Philippines. The defense, led by U.S. General Douglas MacArthur, failed, and MacArthur was forced to abandon the Philippines in mid-1942. He left behind 90,000 American and Filipino troops at Corregidor and on the Bataan Peninsula. But MacArthur vowed, "I shall return." All 4 Karau boys followed in their dad's footsteps to serve their country. Dean in the Navy, Ralph in the Coast Guard, Elwin in the Maritime Services, and Don, married with an infant daughter, in the Illinois Reserve. Dean said goodbye to his parents, headed to Chicago, and enlisted in the Navy on September 1st, 1942. Dean was proud to be in the service, and when he returned on leave, he palled around with his friends. He and close friend Bob Rogers had enlisted together and also eventually served together on the same ship. They had these professional photos taken while back home. After basic training, Dean was assigned to the USS Honolulu, a Brooklyn-class light cruiser commissioned in 1938. The ship had suffered minor damage from a near miss at Pearl Harbor. It displaced 9,650 tons and was 608 feet by 61 feet. It carried 15 6-inch guns and 8 5-inch guns, along with 4 aircraft. It could reach a speed of 32.5 knots and carried a crew of 868. In 1943, the Honolulu operated out of Espiritu Santo in the South Pacific with a task force attempting to engage the famous Tokyo Express, the name given Japan's use of ships at night to deliver personnel, supplies, and equipment to its forces operating in and around New Guinea and the Solomon Islands. On July 13, the Honolulu lost its front bow to a torpedo in the Battle of Kalamangara and returned first to Pearl Harbor and then to San Francisco for repairs. But by the end of 1943, the ship had returned to the Solomon Islands. On the Honolulu, between battles and other work, Dean helped a fellow sailor for a pencil drawing.
They clap their hands and stamp their feet, because they know how he plays. When someone gives him a beat, he really breaks it up. When he plays reveille, he's the boogie woogie bugle boy of Company B. Da, 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 da,
Dean also used his baseball skills, albeit playing softball. And he was a star. Very plainly evident in the last 4 games was the big bat of shortstop Karau, who clouded for extra bases time and again. As U.S. victories mounted following the Battle of Midway in June 1942, General MacArthur planned an invasion of the Philippines. By the fall of 1944, MacArthur was ready to proceed, starting with the invasion of the Philippine island of Leyte. In mid-October, MacArthur struck. He arrived off the coast of Leyte with an armada of 650 ships and 150,000 troops. The Japanese tried to stop MacArthur's momentum, and Japanese pilots were daring, including kamikaze pilots and those flying torpedo planes, taking a heavy toll. But ultimately, the Japanese failed as the U.S. Navy turned back the attempts time and again as it approached the Philippines. On October 12, the Honolulu departed the staging area at Manus Island in the Admiralty Islands and steamed towards the Philippines to join in the invasion of Leyte. As part of a bombardment group, the ship entered Leyte Gulf on October 18. By October 19, the ship was about 6,000 yards off Dulag town and firing on targets in the area. On October 20, the Honolulu took up bombardment positions off Dulag again and began firing anew. At 9:15 a.m., U.S. Army troops landed on Dulag beaches, commencing the invasion of Leyte. The Honolulu and other ships provided cover as the troop transports headed ashore. At 3:58 p.m., the Honolulu received a report of a torpedo plane over the island heading east through a rain squall. A minute later, ship lookouts reported a low-flying plane at about 100 feet above ground, a Japanese Nakajima B-5N2 plane, a model nicknamed the Kate. The ship ordered a change of course, and the ship's batteries opened fire as the plane approached the port beam. Although the plane appeared hit, the pilot dropped a torpedo in the water about 1,500 yards from the Honolulu. At 4:02 p.m., the torpedo hit the port side amidships, below the waterline. Quickly, another ship pulled along the starboard side of the Honolulu for the transfer of casualties, 6 injured officers and 14 injured enlisted men. After the transfer, the Honolulu was able to maneuver on its own at low speeds toward the shallower water just off Dulag. The next morning, after muster, the captain reported that the total casualties suffered on October 20th were 2 officers and 43 men missing, 19 enlisted men dead, and 8 officers and 27 enlisted men injured. The missing included my Uncle Dean. Dean was off duty at the time of the attack and had been below deck. While Dean's sleeping quarters were on the starboard side, he often slept in a friend's bunk on the port side because it was cooler, putting him at the location where the torpedo hit the Honolulu. Dean died a little after 4 p.m. Philippine time on October 20th, 1944, off Dulag on the east side of Leyte Island. The next day, General MacArthur returned to the Philippines, wading ashore through the waters of the Leyte Gulf, waters which contained the remains of my Uncle Dean. Over a week later, Louis and Edna Karau received official notice that their son Dean had died in the service of his country. The day after the torpedo hit the Honolulu, the ship limped back to Manus Island. On November 4 at 3 p.m., there was a memorial service at the Armed Forces Cemetery on the island, with colors flown at half-mast in honor of the USS Honolulu's missing and dead. The Manila American Cemetery and Memorial in the Philippines, dedicated in 1960, occupies 152 acres on a prominent plateau. It contains 17,058 graves, and 36,286 names are inscribed on rectangular limestone piers within 2 hemicycles called the Tablets of the Missing. Dean's name is carved on one of the tablets.